After doing the Ashian comic redraw, I told myself I'd never do something like that again. Drawing comics is fun, but more than 3 pages is exhausting. But let's just say I lied. What you guys didn't know was that I started to make a practice comic all the way back in August, way before I decided to revive this channel. I was slowly working away on it for fun, but then it turned into somewhat of a massive project, and eventually I decided that I wanted to turn it into a video. So now we're here, and buckle up. This is going to be a long one. While you're watching the speed paint, you probably noticed I finished the entirety of the line art for 1 page and then all of the clean sketches. I don't have any footage of anything before that because, like I said earlier, I didn't plan on turning this into a video until much later. It would have been really nice if you guys could see my full process for this, but I think my other comic drawing videos will give you guys enough of an idea on how I do things. For those that haven't watched those videos, it's really just me doing a rough sketch to figure out placements and then the clean sketches to really get things in there. There is so much footage for this video that I had to speed up everything a crazy amount, so I'm sorry if people get dizzy. I wanted to keep this video as short as I possibly can, but it's still over 20 minutes, so I apologize. Anyways, you guys probably saw briefly why I have so much footage. This practice comic has 24 pages, and it seems like an insane amount for a practice comic, but let me explain. I had this urge to write a superhero AU back in July, and obviously started writing it, just like what you see in the video title. I wrote it in novel format because that's fun. I love writing in general, even if I don't think I'm the best at it. No, I am not going to read out my writing for this because it's embarrassing for me since it's not up to those quality standards, but also because it's long. The entire practice comic covers the prologue for that AU, which is about 5 pages in Google Docs. I wrote it in 11-point Times New Roman font and everything is single-spaced. The paragraphs are indented, so I have no need to create an extra space to separate them. In other words, I'd say it's very condensed, so if you were to stretch it out to double-spaced, it'd be a lot of pages. I couldn't find a good point to cut off the prologue for this, so I ended up drawing the entire thing just like that. I didn't want to cut too many corners with the action, but I feel like I sort of did since I'm not good at drawing fight scenes. I'll get better with time, of course, but it was still good that I kind of attempted it. Since I'm not reading the prologue out loud for everyone, the least I can do is summarize it so you guys know what's happening in this comic. This story switches point of views between all of the members of this superhero team. The team is called Delta 9 and there's no deep meaning for it. I just thought it was cool. The prologue follows Matthew's point of view. Matthew is one of Joey's characters, and if you don't know Joey, just know he is my best friend and that I love literally every character he's ever made. Anyways, back to the summary. Matthew is the leader of Delta 9, so it only felt natural to start off with his point of view. He's just having a peaceful day at his job in the cafe, and then he gets sent on break. Before he could settle in and enjoy his break, he gets a sudden call from Moon. I don't know what the right word to describe what Moon is to Delta 9, so I'm just going to call him their manager. He's just someone who's responsible for overseeing their activities and also alerting them. Obviously, if Moon is calling, that means there is trouble somewhere in the city, and Moon relays that to Matthew. Matthew then has to immediately go deal with it even though he is literally on the clock, but superhero work comes first. Though there's also another reason why he has to do it, and I'll explain later. Matthew arrives on scene and sees that we just have a group of people pretty much causing major trouble. In my mind, they destroyed a lot of things, it's chaos, and we see why Delta 9 have to be called. Damon and Doman were already in the scene, but 2 people alone isn't enough. Not to mention that both of their superpowers aren't helping them too much in the fight. So the prologue is pretty much just Matthew dealing with these guys as the rest of Delta 9 slowly come in to help. They all couldn't come immediately after getting the call because they all have normal lives, so you'll probably see that they are all dressed not ideally for battle or anything. Still though, superhero work comes first, and that's the gist of the prologue. I'll have this posted on Tapas so you guys can read it for yourselves. Now, I should give a couple of more details about Delta 9 as well as the world these guys live in so you guys can understand the story more. Right now in the world, Delta 9 are the only people with superpowers. All of the members got their powers in crazy ways, and I based it off of Marvel and DC slightly. Now, the only member without powers is Jinsol because I thought it'd be nice if we had one member of Delta 9 without superpowers. But just because he doesn't have any superpowers doesn't mean he's useless. And you can probably guess from the name of the team, there are 9 members. I already mentioned Matthew, Domin, Damon, and Jinsol. The others in the team are Jihoon, Youngsang, Hye, Seungmin, and Hinata. The members are a mix of mine and Joey's muses, so that's why there might be a couple of unfamiliar names. Also, I have many muses that I don't talk about outside of my main 4. What's interesting about Delta 9 was that they're all friends. This is a friend group, and probably the fact that they were already friends before becoming Delta 9 makes it easier for them to work together. Though there is still a bit of tension between Jihoon and Youngsang because the story takes place in 2022 before I even had Youngsang and Jihoon work out their mess of a relationship. Oh, and it's even messier because this is an AU where the two of them also date Marco, so those idiots better get their shit together. I'm getting off topic though, so let me talk about all of the members' powers in this as well as why I even thought about giving them these powers. It took me a while to figure out powers for some of these people because I wanted to make sure I give them something that fits them as a character. I'd also tell you guys how they got these powers, but I think I'll keep that a mystery. You know, just in case. Anyways, let's start with our lovely leader Matthew. So his power is transforming into animals, and I just thought it fit him because personality-wise, he's usually a pretty lighthearted and fun guy. But he also has a side to him that's pretty serious when the situation calls for it. Something like transforming into animals just seems fitting in a way I can't explain. However, the fact that his power is transforming into animals actually made this comic so much harder to draw. I'm not good at drawing animals at all, so things probably look really off. Matthew's power forced me to actually get out of my comfort zone, so that's good. I think the next one I'll talk about is Domin. Domin is the guy that got flung into the wall and has blonde hair. Domin's power is super speed, and it's not exactly shown all too well in the comic. Super speed is exactly what it sounds like. He can just do things really fast. He also has a lighthearted and fun personality. How I interpret Domin's character based on the way Joey presents him is that he's also quite energetic, so super speed just seems really fitting for him. I'll get into Damon's superpower next. Damon is the guy with long red hair, and in the prologue, it's half tied up in a bun. So Damon's power is that he can nullify other people's superpowers within a radius. Right now in this universe, it's kind of useless because Delta 9 are the only ones with superpowers. Still though, he's out fighting anyways because of reasons. Seungmin shows up before Damon in the comic as Matthew is running to the scene. He shows up as back-end support just like with Jinsol, but he does have powers. We just don't get to see them on display in the prologue. Seungmin's power is that he can turn invisible whenever he wants. Joey told me that he's a spy for the government, so invisibility just seems like a really fitting power to give him. After all, the dude needs to be really stealthy and sneak around to get that intel. I already said Jinsol has no powers, so I'll move on to Hye since he shows up next in the comic. Hye's superpower is being able to generate and manipulate flames. Pretty self-explanatory there, and it's not a unique superpower. However, it's really powerful, and I'd argue he's probably the second most powerful person in Delta 9. Hye's flames are blue because they burn really hot. The next person I'll talk about is Hinata. He's also back-end support. Him, Seungmin, and Jinsol are the support team, which is probably really helpful for these guys because they'll need it. Hinata's superpower is that he can read people's mind and even control them if they look into his eyes and he focuses long enough. It's not much of a combat superpower, so that's why Hinata is back-end support. But I imagine if there was a spy mission to get intel, Hinata and Seungmin would both be super useful in a team. Now, I'll talk about Jihoon's superpower, which required all of my brain cells to figure out when I first wanted to throw him into an AU with literally any kind of power. Jihoon's superpower allows him to turn into people's worst fears by drinking their blood. In the prologue, you'll see him drink a vial of blood and transform into a spider, which is probably the form he takes on the most. Though he has other forms, it just depends on whose blood he drinks. Jihoon has a lot of Hyuk's blood, and Hyuk's worst fear happens to be spiders, which is why Jihoon turns into one if he drinks Hyuk's blood. But let's say he drank Jinso's blood. He'd turn into the embodiment of death because Jinso's worst fear is death. That's pretty much how Jihoon's power works. The final person in the team is Youngsang, who I'd say is the strongest member of Delta 9 for this superpower. Youngsang, I'll at least say he was born with this power. He's half Grim Reaper, which is why you're going to see him wield around a scythe and do other things. Since he's not a full Grim Reaper, he still has a couple of weaknesses, but for the most part, he can do what a normal Grim Reaper can do to an extent. That's pretty much everyone in Delta 9's superpowers. As you guys can probably tell, we have a variety of superpowers and 9 people with powers isn't a lot. However, if they went out of control, that's an issue. So here's where Delta 9 is formed. I'm not going to reveal too much about the story, but let's just say an incident happened that led to Delta 9 being formed by the government. Delta 9 are basically government workers because of it, and now you guys know why they have to prioritize their superhero work. It's technically government work, and the government always comes first, especially when you have a scary and brutal boss. I don't call Moon their boss because I can't really say he has any real authority over them. He can't control them like the big boss can. I think this covers some of the basics that you should know about the characters and the world so you guys can better understand everything. I'm sure I might get a couple of questions about how Delta 9's status of being government workers affects their normal lives. Everyone has to balance their normal lives on top of this. They're not allowed to reveal their identities as Delta 9 to everyone. But in the prologue, everyone was in a rush to deal with the incident that they couldn't exactly cover their faces and effectively hide their identities. They were lucky that there weren't any news media there at the time to expose them. I imagine for some of them, it was really hard to find an excuse to escape their normal lives to get to the incident and deal with it. Matthew mentions that Hye was in the middle of a photo shoot, so it must have been really awkward explaining that he had to go immediately without giving a concrete reason why. I'm sure you guys will notice this based on the outfit Jihoon is wearing when he arrives on the scene, but Jihoon is a medical student. I can't imagine that it's easy to leave this immediately either. I think the ones that have this secret life thing the hardest are Hye, Domin, and Damon, because they're all celebrities that are in the public eye. Hye and Domin are idols, while Damon is an actor. If you guys know anything about the K-pop and entertainment industry, schedules can get brutal. Domin was lucky to just be working out and not having anything to do that day, but Damon and Hye, not so much. But it's not like they can say no to government duties, so they have to deal with it. Something I wanted to explore with Unit Delta 9, which is the name of the AU or the story, is how superhero lives can affect your normal lives and the consequences it has. Because to my knowledge, there's not a lot of media out there that explores it. I wanted to go in depth with it, and you don't see much of it in the prologue yet. I'm obviously so much further ahead in writing this than drawing it, and I'm not going to spoil what I wrote. But let's just say there are a lot of negative consequences with the pressures of being a superhero, keeping this life a secret, as well as making sure your normal life isn't falling apart, because if you don't have your normal life, what do you have? I think another thing I'll mention is that these boys are all pretty young. In the story, they're in their early 20s. If you're wondering about Jihoon being a medical student that young, he skipped a grade. And also, I did research on how medical school works in South Korea, where the story takes place. Apparently, medical school takes place immediately after high school in Korea, and based on Ji-hoon's age, I think he's doing clinicals, which probably complicates his whole superhero thing. Like I said, there's a lot. Now, it sounds like I'm taking this story super seriously, but actually, I'm not. I began writing Unit Delta 9 for fun, and also this comic is just for fun. It's meant for practice, so I have no intention of making it like an actual webcomic. Maybe I'll occasionally draw more of Unit Delta 9 for practice, but don't expect consistent updates on it. I'm sure that might be disappointing to people. One day, I'll make an actual webcomic. I don't know when yet. I did already reference this AU a tiny bit with some of the art pieces I've drawn. I'll throw them up here right now, and I'll take the time to explain them. Oh, also forgot to mention in this comic, they all have code names, or I guess aliases. I should have mentioned that way earlier, but I forgot to since I'm kind of winging this voiceover. But back to me explaining the art pieces since I need to fill time, and I think I won't be able to do that if I talk about the art process for this comic. The first piece is Hye in his hero gear. I made the design completely up and winged it. Somehow, it turned out okay. You may notice that in this AU, Hye has a completely different appearance. Hye looked different in 2022 and didn't dye his hair orange until like much later in the year, I think. I kind of like how he looks in this, and his hairstyle is nice. I do like his current design though, but at the very least, maybe that hairstyle he has can show up every now and then. I always draw him with his same side part just to keep him recognizable. The second drawing is Youngsung and Ji-hoon sparring with each other. That specific scene doesn't happen until chapters later. I think it was in chapter 8, which is a while away from the prologue. There are smaller details that I didn't keep accurate, but I really just drew that for fun. Youngsung and Ji-hoon spar with each other quite frequently, and Youngsung always wins because I've established that he's the strongest member in Delta 9. Ji-hoon is pretty strong too, but it just depends on the form he takes on. His spider form that he likes to turn into stands no chance against Youngsung though. It doesn't matter the universe Youngsung and Ji-hoon are put in, these two are always going to fight in some way, and sparring is just Ji-hoon's excuse to fight physically. These two are a mess, but it's okay, they're better now. So we're almost 18 minutes into the video and I still have quite a bit of time to fill, so I think I can finally talk about the art process. You guys are going to think I'm crazy for this. Currently in the video, you're seeing me do the flat colors. I forgot a couple of details with the flat colors like drawing some injuries on Domin and Damon, but I fixed that later. Flat colors was okay, but you know what was the most agonizing thing about this comic? The line art. Especially if your clean sketches were extremely messy, which mine kind of were. So the line art ended up being me trying to fix my laziness. The line art took the longest to complete, and on average, it was like 3 hours per page. Multiply that by 24 because we have 24 pages, and that's 72 hours I would have spent on line art. And because sadly I can't coop myself up in my room and forget about life to just draw, yeah, that was the most brutal stage of this entire thing. I was staying up really late constantly because I wanted to get this done so bad. I set a deadline for myself and I wanted to try and make it. That requires sacrificing my sleep schedule, but I did it for you guys. Don't worry, the sacrificing my sleep schedule got less when I moved on to the other steps of this comic. I keep telling myself I'll never pull things like this again, but let's be real, I'm going to. Because I'm so passionate about art and creating things that I'm fine with going through this. Now, if only I could put that same passion into my schoolwork. I think people looking at this comic will think I'm crazy for not simplifying my art style. I didn't even do my usual shortcut of blurring away the background even though it looks mid and I should. I told myself I need to stop doing that in comics at least, so that took up more time. I really didn't have to do my usual rendering because most comics don't do that, but I don't think I can bring myself to not have it. I want every panel to look pleasing to look at, and with my style, that means lighting effects and rendering because I think that's what I'm going to be known for at this point. Rendering makes it easier for people to ignore my mistakes. Funnily enough, rendering took the shortest amount of time for me, so it really wouldn't be a big deal for me to continue anyways. I actually finished rendering for all 24 pages in an entire day of non-stop working without staying up until like 2 AM to do it, so that's good. Even the rendering when the characters are outside didn't take too long, even though there is like one extra step. I really should consider simplifying my art style for webcomics, but I guess I can't bring myself to do that. I didn't do that in 2020 when I made that one webtoon, and I certainly don't think I'll do it now. I think I have a problem with that for real, but maybe people will appreciate my efforts. I'd honestly hope so, as silly as some of it is. Looking at this comic, it's definitely not perfect. My art will never be perfect. The backgrounds were so rough, and at one point, I legitimately gave up on doing them and just copied and pasted line art from the previous panels. I'd rather do that than use 3D assets apparently. You can tell this comic is not meant to be a serious project based on that alone. I think if I was making a serious project, I'd be making sure the backgrounds looked consistent and looked good at all times. This is just a practice comic, so it doesn't matter. Though this being a practice comic gave me a pretty good estimate on how long I'd take for something of this length, and apparently it takes me months. I don't know how webtoon artists do it. To be fair, this comic is a lot longer than the normal webtoon update. I think it's like 3 times longer if a normal webtoon update is like 40 panels. It might be shorter depending on the genre, but for drama webtoons, it's like 40 panels. To put it in normal comic pages I draw, that's around 7 pages if each page contains 6 panels. I remembered in the past, I spent 4 to 7 hours on one page, but now it might be even longer, so maybe it'd be 9 hours on one page. That's like 63 hours of work for me, and I don't think I can do that with my current schedule. So truly, I have so much respect to comic artists. Okay, maybe some of them use shortcuts and my stubborn ass refuses to, but still. I think that's about all I can say about things relating to art with this comic. Clearly, I don't have much commentary. I think it's because my process is always the same, and also that so much time has passed since I first started this, to the point where I'm editing this video now and it's hard to remember specific details, unlike my other videos where I generally finish recording in a day or two, and then edit so everything is still fresh in my mind. We still have a little bit left in the video, so I'll probably talk about my writing process for Unit Delta 9, even though you guys don't see it. The writing is pretty much the foundation of this practice comic. Actually, I'd say all writing of any kind is the foundation for all of the comics I've ever drawn on this channel for the most part. Even the Ashian practice comic had some writing in mind, but I never put it into a Google Doc. While your writing doesn't have to be in novel format, at the very least, I think you need a script or an idea of how things are going to go. Believe me, if I was thinking about stuff on the fly with this practice comic, I think it'd end up so much messier. Since I said I wrote Unit Delta 9 as if it was a novel, there were a couple of things I did. Obviously, I set up the document with my usual formatting and then kind of get to writing. If anyone is wondering, I obviously have no plans to publish the writing version of Unit Delta 9 because it's meant to be a for fun story, so it'll be kept between me and my close friends. I'll share whatever I feel like sharing with the rest of the world though. I pretty much come up with things on the fly with the story, and I know it's something I probably shouldn't do, but because this isn't a serious project, I didn't want to do too much planning as if it actually was one. I think I'd get too caught up in trying to complete it on top of everything else I need to do with my life, so it's better this way, even if the story ends up quite messy. I think free writing it with no planning except for an idea of basic events in my mind is really fun though. Some people can pop out a masterpiece with things like that, but I'm not built like that. When I was at my most motivated with this story, I wrote like a chapter almost every day, and the chapters are at least 5 pages each, but there are a lot that are more. With each new chapter, we switch points of views, and I try to make sure everyone has their point of view at least once before repeating a character's point of view. Because there are basically 9 point of views, I think the story progresses a lot slower than things I normally write, and also probably seems more scatterbrained. I like rotating between different characters' points of views though, especially because each of the characters have different issues and ways of thinking about things, and I always think that's very fun. For example, Jihoon and Youngsang. I'll use them as examples because they're both my characters, and also I think they'd be the ones most people would be the most familiar with if they've known me for a while. The two of them have completely different ways of thinking, which also kind of gets into why Jihoon hates Youngsang so much. Youngsang doesn't really care for others, and I'd maybe consider him morally gray. He just does things, and I wouldn't say he's selfish, but he's not exactly selfless either. So it seems very off that he's a superhero in this. But he barely does what he's supposed to do because of his friends, because at the very least, he cares about them. Jihoon, on the other hand, cares too much about others, and despite having a really harsh demeanor, he'll do anything and everything for people. Jihoon is just terrible at expressing his true thoughts and feelings though. Pretty much, Jihoon believes he should do things for others and just be pretty selfless, but it leads him to neglecting himself. By having their specific point of views in chapters, I think I can dive deeper into things like that and explore stuff. Plus, you can see how these mindsets affect the actions they all take. The prologue is only the beginning introduction to the story, so I don't think you guys can see all of that finer details yet, but I like talking about it anyways. I think the bulk of this video is pretty much everything except the art stuff. It's probably really boring for some people to hear about things like that, but I'll still ramble anyways because I kind of like talking about this. After much yapping, we're nearing the end of the speed paint part of the video. I drew so many pages for this and I can't post them all in one post. Instagram limits me to 20 photos per post, and since there are 24 pages, that's not going to work. I mentioned Tapas at the beginning of the video, so that's where I'm going to post the entirety of this so you guys can read it. However, I'll post a preview of the comic on my social medias. By preview, I really mean the first 3 pages, which should be enough to get people interested if they want to read this. Do I expect to gain a lot of traction for this? Not really. In the end, this was just a practice comic for fun, and a way for me to improve my skills. Throughout drawing this practice comic, I got out of my comfort zone a lot, and that's really important. I want to grow as an artist and not remain stagnant, so pulling off something like this is kind of important. It's not just this practice comic, but pretty much any comic I've ever drawn in my life. It helps me get better as an artist. It's because comics are so much work compared to a normal illustration, and they provide a couple of unique challenges compared to just a normal illustration. I'm so glad I got this done before the end of 2024, and also that I finished it in general. I think turning it into a video kind of helped motivate me to finish this, because otherwise, this would just be sitting here collecting dust indefinitely. Anyways, I'll give you guys a better view of the first 3 pages since we're at the end of the speed paint. Alright, and here are the first 3 pages of this comic. You probably won't get a good look at them on the video, so I'll have my social medias as well as the Tapas link to this in the description so you guys can better read this. If you've somehow stuck around and endured my yapping for this long, thank you very much. Even with all of the insanity, this was something I don't regret doing at all, and maybe if people like things like this, I'll make more videos similar to this. Thank you so much for watching until the end of the video, and if you want to see more from me, make sure to hit the like and subscribe button. I hope to see everyone in the next one.